Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Pre-Algebra with Miss Betsy. We're continuing in Chapter 3 of our text, which is Pre-Algebra for Christian Schools by Bob Jones University Press. We are in Section 3.6. For those of you who might be following along, that would be found on page 94. And we're talking about the metric system. Before we get started though, can you tell me what it is that a triceratops sits on? He sits on his tricerabottom. So what we're talking about today, I said, is the metric system. This is the unit of measurement that the vast majority of the world uses for weight, for distance, for time. It's also the language of math and science. So as you continue on through junior high and high school, or if you make a career choice or a college major that has anything to do what all with math or science, you're going to become very intimately acquainted with the whole idea of the metric system. It seems strange to us at first when we're using the metric system because we're not accustomed to thinking in terms of meters. Now, we have gotten very accustomed to a 2-liter drink, which is about the same amount as 2 quarts. And that's maybe about the only thing that we use most very commonly here in the United States. But it's a very logical system to use once you have figured out exactly what's going on. That's because it's a decimal system. It's based on tens. So what they have, we have a base unit of length in the metric system, and that is a meter. And a meter is roughly equivalent to 1 US yard. A yard is 36 inches. A meter is a little bit more than 39 inches. What we find that is so really neat about using the metric system is to go from your base unit of length, which is a meter, you can multiply by 10 or 100 or 1,000 to get larger units of measure. You can divide again by 10, 100 or 1,000 to get smaller units of measure in the metric system. That's what makes it so easy to go from perhaps millimeters to kilometers. You're just multiplying by what they call a power of 10 or some factor of 10, multiplying by 10 to the 6th, which is 1 million. But we're multiplying by factors of 10 as opposed to, if we're going to go from an English inch to a mile, you might have to say, okay, there are 12 inches in a foot, there are 3 feet in a yard, there are 1,760 yards in a mile, or you might think, okay, there are 36 inches in a yard, but there's 3 feet in a yard, and there's 5,280 feet in a mile. You see what I'm talking about? The multipliers that you use. I would much rather multiply by 10 or 100 or 1,000 than to multiply and divide by 5,280 or 36. So it's just a consistency that's used with the metric system that makes it very, very nice to use. As I've said, we have the meter, which is our basic unit of length in the metric system. It's 39 inches and a little bit more, but we're not even going to worry about converting back and forth from the metric system to the English system. We're just going to worry about how do we understand what's being said when they're using metric system. So what we have is we have this series of prefixes over here, and you remember from English that a prefix is something that attaches to the beginning of a word to further define what that word is. Here we have a meter, and that's our basic unit of length, 1 meter. Kilo means 1,000. So when you attach kilo as a prefix in front of meter, you have kilometer. What is a kilometer? 1 km. 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters. 1 km is 1,000 m. 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters. What do we have next? We have hecto. These are Latin roots. We have hecto. And our chart tells us that hecto means 100. Hectometer or hectometer. Hectometer. 1 hectometer is 100 meters. Hecto means 100. Meter, 100 meters. We have Deca. What does Deca mean? Deca means 10. Use that as a prefix in front of meter, and you have a decameter. 10 meters, you would think. Sure enough, 1 decameter, and I want you to notice how that's abbreviated. DKM, 1 decameter, is 10 meters. Now we have deci. And this is why we have the DKM and just the DM. 1 deci means 1/10. And I'm not writing 1/10 because we're going to use the fact, just relocating the decimal point, which is what happens when you multiply and divide by powers of 10, like 10 to the second power, which is 100, 10 to the third power, which is 1,000. You move the decimal point to the right or to the left. So we're going to use 0.1 to indicate 1/10. So based on what we've been talking about so far, a decimeter, if we put that in front here, that should mean 1/10 of a meter. Deci is 1/10 meter. Sure enough, 1 dm is 0.1 meters, which is 1/10 of a meter. What do you have next? You have centi. Let's think about a centipede. You know, we talk about an insect having 100 legs. Now, I don't know if centipedes really do have 100 legs, but I do know that a century is 100 years. Centi means 100. So what would you think that a centimeter? 100th. A centimeter should be 100th of a meter. Sure enough, 1 cm is equal to 0.01. How do you read that? That's 100th meter. And our last prefix that we have is Millie. A millipede, you know, that's an insect that has 1,000 legs. Now I'm quite sure that our little millipedes do not have 1,000 legs, but sometimes it seems like they do. A millimeter, right here, this says 0.001, you read that 1,000th. So millimeter should be 1,000th of a meter, right? Sure enough, 1 mm, 1 millimeter is 0.001, 1,000th of a meter. And what we find is if we want to say, okay, how do I go from 1 meter to however many kilometers? Well, we're going to divide by 1,000, and I actually pulled out the wrong illustration here. I wanted to say that 1 kilometer is how many meters? Kilometer is 1,000 meters. So let me go ahead and show you this little chart that they have in your book that just shows you how you go multiply by 10, by 100, by 1,000 to change units. Go ahead and erase this. And now is when it would be very nice if I actually had a remote control on my camcorder, but I don't. Kilometers, hectometer, hectometer, decameter, meter, decimeter, centimeter, and millimeter. And this is all found in your book. You have this little chart here that they have written for you. And I will tell you that they've included all of these units here so that we see a meter you multiply by 10 to get a decameter. You'll multiply by 10 again to get a hectometer. You multiply again by 10 to get a kilometer. Meter you divide by 10 to get a decimeter. Divide by 10 again to get a centimeter. And then divide by 10 again to get a millimeter. But the ones that are used most frequently would be kilometer, meter, centimeter, and millimeter. If you can learn those are the ones that you're going to most frequently run across in your reading, in your work, in your science classes, except for in your math class where they're teaching you how to move from one unit to another. So let's go ahead and see what our book says on page 94. It says, to change from one metric unit to another, you're going to multiply or divide by a power of 10. And remember, powers of 10, we've talked about this a lot. Powers come from exponential notation. This is 10 to the first power, and we have that little exponent there. We don't write 10 to the first because we understand that we only have one 10 here, but what we have, 10 to the second power, 10 to the third power. This is using our exponential notation, and you remember that our exponent says, use this number, which we call a base, as a factor that many times, and factors are what we multiply together to get the answer to a multiplication problem. 10 to the first would be just 10. 10 squared says, use 10 as a factor 2 times. 10 times 10 is 100. 10 to the third says, use 10 as a factor 3 times, which is 1,000. 10 to the fourth, 10 used as a factor 4 times, 10,000. 10 to the sixth is 10 used as a factor, 6 times. And you see why we like to say 10 to the sixth power instead of writing all of this out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is equal to 1 million. 3, 4, 5, 6. And you see this neat pattern right here that is very beneficial for you to learn. 10 to the second power has 2 zeros. 10 to the third has 1, 2, 3 zeros. 10 to the sixth has, exactly right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 zeros. So when you're multiplying or dividing, the power represents the number of zeros. 10 to the sixth, 1 million. 10 to the fifth, 100,000. So make sure that you understand this connection here. Understand what it is that we're talking about when we say 10 to the sixth, 10 to the third power. Now, still on page 94, right in the middle, this says, underneath this chart, it says, according to the chart of metric units, you multiply to change a larger unit to a smaller unit. So the larger unit is the kilometer, obviously something that is 1,000 meters is much larger than something that is 1,000th of a meter. So here we have the larger units, and I bet you that is out. Actually, amazingly, it's not. Larger unit. Larger units are on the left. Smaller units are on the right. Look at your chart. multiply when you go from larger to smaller. Divide when you go from smaller to larger. I really don't know how to teach this in a way that everybody's going to say, oh, understand exactly what's going on. Got to look at your book, sit down, work through the problems, figure out exactly what's going on, get some other resources. Okay? Example 1 says, write the missing number 4.725 kilometers is equal to how many meters? What does our chart say? Our chart says if we're moving from larger units to smaller units, we're going to multiply. If we're moving from smaller units to larger units, we're going to divide. So first off, you've got to learn what these units are. You've got to learn that a kilometer is larger than a meter. So since we're moving from larger units to smaller units, we're going to multiply this number of kilometers to get to the meters. Now, I happen to think that the easiest way that you can know what to do here is just to remember that kilometer means 1,000. So we're going to multiply 4.725 by 1,000, but let me show you what they have you do. They say, we're going to start here. I don't want to use a blue marker. We're going to start here on at the kilometer side, and we're going to move one space to get to hectometers. We're going to do another space to get to decameters. We're going to use another space to multiply first, multiply again, multiply a third time to get to meters. Each space that you move is equivalent to multiplying by 1 time, multiplying by 10 once. So we've done 10 to the first, 10 to the second, 10 to the third. We're multiplying by a power of 10 by 10 to the third power because we've taken 3 steps. What did we see that 10 to the third was equal to? 10 to the third was 1,000. You had the same number of zeros, but you don't have to worry about the fact that we're going to multiply by 1,000 by 10 to the third and how many steps, and that's 10 to the third, which is equal to 1,000. Remember that kilometer means 1,000 meters. So if we want to change to kilometers, we want to change to meters, multiply this by 1,000. So you have 4.725 times 1,000. When you multiply by 10 or 100 or 1,000, you remember you're going to move your decimal point one place to the right for every time you multiply by 10. And this is, I think, what they're trying to get you to realize with this step. We're multiplying by 10 to the third. We're going to move our decimal point 3 units to the right when we multiply. So we have 4.725 kilometers is 4,275 meters because we've multiplied by 1,000. Okay. And your book says moving 3 units to the right is the same as multiplying by 10,000 or multiplying by 1,000. And your book itself shows exactly what I'm talking about right here, where it just multiplying by 1,000, you move your decimal point 3 units to the right. If you're going to divide by 1,000, you multiply your decimal point, you move your decimal point 3 units to the left. Let's go ahead and look at this next example here, where this says to change a smaller unit to a larger unit, you're going to divide. Moving the decimal point to the left one place for each step that you take is equivalent to dividing by power of 10. So we want to know 5 millimeters is equivalent to how many decimeters. Okay? We're moving from millimeters to decimeters. We're moving from smaller units to larger units, so we're going to divide. How many spaces do we move? How many units do we move? There's 1, 2. 2 spaces to the left, as I spell spaces with 2 S's. 2 spaces to the left, that means move your decimal point 2 places to the left. So here we have 5 millimeters. Where's our decimal point on this? It's right here. We're going to have to move it 1 space to the left, 2 spaces to the left. How are we going to show 2 spaces to the left? Remember, we have to add a 0 into that tens place. So 5 millimeters is the same as 0.05 decimeters. We're dividing by a power of 10, which is 10 squared. We're dividing by 100. We move 2 spaces to the left. We move our decimal point 2 places to the left. So let's go through all of these on skill check. Let me just show you, just run through them. And I think that for those of you who were really struggling the other day, that maybe this will click for you. Okay, we have 35 centimeters is equal to how many meters? What are we doing? We're going from centimeters to millimeters. Centimeters to millimeters. We're moving from smaller units to larger units. Excuse me, smaller units to larger units. What are we going to do? We're going to divide. Okay? How many spaces are we moving? 1, 2. So we're going to divide by what? 10 to the second power, which is 100 that we're dividing by. How do you divide by 10 to the second? You take this decimal point and you just move it 2 spaces to the left and relocate it. So 35 centimeters is 0.35 meters. Now you might say there wasn't a 0 there. All I did was move the decimal point and I get 0.35 meters, 35 hundredths of a meter. True, but when you use decimal numbers that are less than 0, you always put a 0 right in front of it so that it screams at you that you have a decimal number and you don't lose that decimal point. Now think about it. What does a centimeter say? What is centimeter? It means 100th. So this says 35 hundredths of a meter. 1 centimeter would be 100th of a meter. 35 centimeters would be 35 hundredths of a meter. That's using that vocabulary. We have 2.4 kilometers is equal to how many meters? What are our units? Kilometers and meters. We're going from larger to smaller. What are we going to do? We're going to multiply. What are we going to multiply by? Well, let's see how many units we move. Kilometer to hectometer is 1, 2, 3. Multiply, we're moving 3 units to the right, so what we're doing is multiplying by 10 to the third, which is 1,000. How do you multiply by 1,000? You move this decimal point 3 units to the right. We're starting here, we have 1, 2, 3. So 2.4 kilometers is 2,400 meters. That's because 1 kilometer Remember your prefixes. 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters. 2 kilometers, 2,000 meters, plus 400 meters. All we're doing is moving the decimal point. Another one, 0.07 meters is equal to how many millimeters? What are we doing here? We're moving from meter to millimeters, moving from larger to smaller, so we're going to multiply. How many spaces do we move? 1, 2, 3. We're going to move our decimal point 3 places to the right. So we have 1 space, 2 space, 3 space. We need to put a 0 there to indicate that we've moved that decimal point 1 place over, to indicate that we multiplied by 1,000. So 0.07 meters is 70 millimeters. If we have 470 meters is equal to 4.70 something. What units do we have now? Okay, well, if we started with our decimal point here in meters, which way did we move our decimal point? Well, we moved our decimal point 2 units to the left, didn't we? We started out 470 decimal point. Even though you didn't see it, you know the decimal point is right at the end of the whole number. It's right after the digit that's in the units place. It moved 2 spaces to the left. Where did it start? Started at millimeters. It moved 2 places to the left. 470 meters is equivalent to 4.70 hectometers. And that's what you're going to do to figure out what the missing unit descriptor is. Next one we have is 785 centimeters. 785 centimeters is equal to 78.5 something. Where did the decimal point start? Started right here after the 5. It moved 1 unit to the left, 1 space to the left. We're at centimeters. What unit do you have when you move 1 space to the left? Yeah, you have decimeter, not decameter, decimeter. So you have 78.5 decimeters. The last one that I want to do is 0.328 meters. 0.328 meters is 328 what? What's happened to our decimal point? It started here to the left of the 3. It's ended up here to the right of the 8. It's moved 1 unit, 2, 3 places to the right. We started at millimeters. We moved 1, 2, 3 places to the right. What's our unit? Our unit is millimeters. See, the last thing that they're talking about is comparing units with greater than, less than, or equal. So let's do these 3. If you have 100 meters, 1 hectometer. Is 100 meters greater than a hectometer, less than a hectometer, or equal to a hectometer? Well, let's see. What we have to do is we're going from meters, we're going to convert to hectometers. Our units have to be the same to compare them. So what are we going to do to move from meters to hectometers? That's 1 space, 2 spaces to the left. So that means that with our 100 meters, we're going to take our decimal point and move it 1 space, 2 units to the left, which gives us 1 point. So 100 meters is equal to 1 hectometer. Our next one, 100 centimeters and 1 decameter. 100 centimeters and 1 decameter. Is that going to be greater than, less than, or equal to? We're going to start with 100 centimeters, and we're going to move 1 space, 2 space, 3 spaces to the left. So we need to move our decimal point in 100 centimeters 1, 2, 3 places to the left. So 100 centimeters is actually equal to 1/10 of a decameter. So 100 centimeters, if it's equal to 1/10 of a decameter, is clearly less than 1 decameter. The final one that I want to show you is the comparison between a hectometer and 10 meters. You have 1 hectometer and 10 meters. If we want to convert from hectometer to meter, we're moving 2 units to the right. We're moving from larger to smaller, so we're multiplying. What are we going to multiply by? 1 hectometer. We're going to multiply 1 hectometer by 100. We're going to see that 1 hectometer is 100 meters. So is 100 meters greater than, less than, or equal to 10 meters? Obviously, it's greater than. What you want to do for these is convert the units so that you're comparing the same units. Hope that makes sense to you. Let me write this again here where I show the actual conversion. 100 centimeters to move to a decameter. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1/10 of a decameter. Whoops, forgot my K. 1/10 of a decameter is obviously less than 1 decameter, so that's why you want to go ahead and convert the units so that you can compare apples and apples. Work with that, do your best to learn it, because you will continue to have find it necessary to work with the metric system throughout the rest of your time in school. Talk to you later. Have a good day.